Hey, good morning. It's Tuesday, and again into the second week of our physical distancing and remote learning and whatever else that we're up to. Hopefully, everybody's well and taking care of themselves. And we'll move on today with another exploration into uh, how we relate to our substance use, if we have any. And today we're going to take a look at cannabis. And that's an issue that is very confusing for lots of people. And there's been tons of misinformation and beliefs and uh, uh, confusion between what's true and what isn't true. So uh, I guess I'll just talk about that a little bit before we start this test. We're going to do a test on that same website that I gave you yesterday on the alcohol use, and I hope some of you took a look at that. Again, it's really important to do some checking about where we're at with our substance use. Most people who use substances really don't think that they have a problem with it. And again, like I said yesterday, it's because we like it, and in lots and lots of cases, we perceive it as doing something for us. And cannabis is particularly interesting because there's been uh, almost a generation of belief spread about cannabis that it is really a inconsequential drug. I hear over and over and over again, well, it's just weed, or I'm just smoking marijuana. I'm not doing this or I'm not doing that. And one of the really important things that we need to understand is that that drug has changed significantly over the last 20 years. It's, for the most part, become stronger and stronger in terms of THC percentages. It's gone up from probably 6 to 8% in the 60s to 25 to 30% now. And with the new refined products, shatter, butters, those kinds of things, often it's up above 80%. And so the drug that was talked about in the 60s and 70s is very, very different than the drug that's been available now. But those 60 and 70 belief systems are still very, very active. The other thing, I guess, about it is how people look at it. You know, uh, if somebody was getting drunk every day, or getting up in the morning and having a few drinks of alcohol, they and people around them would start to question what they're doing. But for some reason, we seem to be really okay with daily cannabis use and multiple times a day. Like somebody getting up in the morning and smoking weed, or going out to lunch and smoking weed, and, right after work, and then before they go to bed. If if that was alcohol, people would really question what that person is doing. And well, certainly they're different drugs, but anytime we're altering our brain chemistry on that kind of that regular kind of basis, it's going to change us. And I know as soon as I start talking about this kind of stuff, I generally get lots and lots of feedback from people about, oh, good heavens, like look how many people alcohol has killed, which is certainly true. And then there's the statement, so and marijuana's never killed anybody, and it's medicine and all that kind of stuff. Uh, it still has capacity to change us. And one of the huge issues with any substance use issue is that when we're involved in that ourselves, we cannot see those changes. And so, what I often say to people is if you really think that um, marijuana isn't affecting you and it isn't a big deal, leave it alone for a month and see how you feel. Pay attention to those differences, because if we're stuck in one place all the time, then we don't really know the other side of things. So if you think it isn't a problem, check that out. Anyway, we're going to take a look at this test. This is on the Evolution Health site. And where did I put it? It must be here. heaven's sakes. Oh, that's my website. There we go. By the way, all these videos are also on the drug class website if you want to check. So sorry I got you distracted there. Anyway, again, I'm going to use a younger person's stats to kind of fill this test out. And let's call him Sam. And Sam is a male. And Sam is 18. And during the past 3 months, how often have you used cannabis? Well, let's put Sam into that daily category. Somebody that feels that it isn't a significant issue to use that drug daily. And during the past 3 months, how often have you had a strong desire or urge to use cannabis? And lots and lots of people don't really recognize what that means. And strong desire or urge is another word for craving. And so if you think you need it to sleep, if you think you need it to relax, if you think that it calms you, then those are strong desires and urges. So let's give Sam a little bit of benefit of the doubt and say that he at least recognizes that he's having those weekly. During the past 3 months, how often has your use of cannabis led to health, social, legal, or financial problems? So one of the things that I often ask people is, well, how much are you spending on this? So typically, if you are smoking weed every day, say a gram a day, that's about $10 a month, sorry, $10 a day. So, that's the washer, sorry. It's going to play a little song there. I should have turned it off. $10 a day is about $300 a month. And for lots of people, that is a significant issue. So let's at least say monthly. During the past 3 months, how often have you failed to do what was normally expected of you because of your use of cannabis? So again, what does that mean? It could mean not showing up at work. It could mean not functioning at work. It could mean if you're a student, not getting your homework done. It could mean falling asleep in class. It could mean not being able to focus in class. It could mean having trouble getting yourself motivated to do stuff. So again, let's create a little bit of benefit of the doubt there and say weekly for that one. And of course, it also means, which is really hard for people to get their head around, it means driving impaired. If you're using that drug daily, and what the recommendations state is that you shouldn't drive within 6 hours of using. So if you're getting up using in the morning and then getting in your car and driving to work, that's doing something that isn't normally expected of you. So again, you might want to rethink that one for yourself. Has a friend, relative, or anyone else expressed concern about your cannabis use? So if you are a teen, it's likely come up in your household, unless you're totally scamming your parents, that, hey, maybe you're smoking too much, or we don't like you doing that. So let's say yes in the last 3 months. And then the next one is, have you ever tried and failed to control or cut down your use or stop using cannabis? So good question. Now, lots of people will do things, they'll take tolerance breaks, because one of the characteristics of cannabis use is if you start using it too regularly, it plugs up all the receptors, which is that's a whole other show that we'll discuss at some point. But it plugs up all the receptors, and you have to use more and more and more to get any effect. And so often people take tolerance breaks for a few days or a week. and to allow their system to start cleaning itself out. So, I mean, you could look at it that way. Uh, but did you do it as long as you said you were going to do it? So if you've said, "Hey, I'm smoking too much weed. I'm just gonna do it on the weekends," and that didn't happen, then you tried and failed. If you said, "I'm not going to do it uh, unless I'm at home," and all of a sudden you're doing it somewhere else, then you tried and failed. So again, let's go. Yes, in the last 3 months. Uh, uh, how often do you drive, or after using cannabis, or ride with a driver who has? And if you're one of those people that don't think it's an issue, then that's probably usually. And I talk to lots and lots of kids who just legitimately think that this isn't a big deal because they compare it to alcohol. And alcohol certainly is different in terms of how it impairs us, but cannabis impairs us as well. Uh, when you use cannabis, how often do you drink alcohol or use other substances? And that's not an uncommon thing either. But let's go with sometimes. Uh, in the past 12 months, what's the largest amount you estimate that you have spent on cannabis in a given day? And uh, so, if somebody bought, say, 3 grams, so let's just, not that they necessarily would use it all that day, but let's go $30. And on an average month, how much money would you estimate that you spend on cannabis? And again, if you're using regularly, it's probably at least $200. I mean, if you bought an ounce, depending on where you're getting it and what quality, it might be that much. And then next question is, how do you get your cannabis? Select all that apply. It's been interesting since cannabis has become legal in Canada. More and more teens are getting access to dispensary cannabis. So they're not going into stores and buying it, because the stores are actually pretty good at checking ID and stuff like that. But just like alcohol, there's lots and lots of people who are old enough that don't seem to have a problem buying it for teens. Uh, but let's check all three. So dispensary or licensed service, informally from a connection. So you buy a little weed from your friend, or people are just cutting in on what they have. Um, and then what's your employment status? Uh, Sam's still in school, so let's say he's a full-time student, but he also has a part-time job. And let's put in a Regina postal code here and go S4P. And please check this box to acknowledge that your non-personal information will be used for purposes improving this program. We do not collect individual stats, blah, blah, blah. And it's generating a report. So let's see where Sam fits into cannabis use. And again, up in the top here, it says you can send to email. And if you do this test, I would really be interested in taking a look at it. So if you could send it to me at info@drugclass.ca, I'd appreciate that. But we'll look a little further here. So about 50% of 18-year-old Canadian men have used cannabis at least once in their lifetime. This pie chart shows how often 18-year-old men have used cannabis ever or in the last year. So 50%, well, I went too far, 50% said never. Sam is in the top 5.7%. So if you use cannabis daily and you're in that sort of 17 to 20-year-old age category, 94% of people who use cannabis are not using it that much. You're in the highest percentile of that group. More than once a week, 6.1%, weekly 5.9%, monthly 6.7%, once or twice in the last year, 9.1%, and not in the last year, 16.5%. So again, if our perception is that everybody's doing it, that's not true. But we tell ourselves that to allow ourselves to continue and make it okay, because that's what we do. How much did he spend? $2,400 at $200 a month. That's 267 movies. I don't know if anybody could go to that many movies, or 960 slices of pizza. So assist score is, yesterday we looked at an audit score. Assist is alcohol, smoking, substance use score. So Sam's assist score was 35. And what this says is no risk is 0. If your score on that test is 1 to 3, then you're low risk. If you scored between 4 and 26, that's a moderate risk. And if you scored over 26, then you are in a high risk area. And what high risk means is that you have a substance use issue. And the question that you always need to be asking yourself is, am I okay with that? Is that what I want for me? And you'll tell yourself all sorts of things. Well, it's not hurting me, and I like it, and it's only weed, and all of those kinds of things. But regardless of those things that we tell ourselves, if you're scoring anywhere, above 26 on that test, this stuff is a problem for you. And, part of the problem is we don't see the problem. And the other part of the problem is that this drug changes our ability to look at ourselves carefully and see whether that this is a problem or not. So the risks, if you go in to look at that 20 greater than 27, you're at high risk of experiencing severe problems, health, social, financial, legal, relationship, as a result of your current patterns of use, and are likely to be dependent on cannabis. And one of the old myths about cannabis is you can't get addicted to it, and I mean that's just simply not true. That also says that you noted that usually drive after using cannabis or ride with a driver who has. Research has shown that driving high causes you to weave in and out of lanes, slow down and speed up, miss signs, misjudge time and distance, exhibit slow reaction time, and it doubles your risk for a series of crash. Treat cannabis like alcohol and do not drive or arrange for a ride from a sober driver. I mean, that just makes sense. And then they talk about greening out. Drinking alcohol or using other substances before consuming cannabis can increase the likelihood of greening out, which is a cute term for a cannabis overdose. And people, you can't overdose on cannabis. Actually, you can. Cannabis overdoses typically are not lethal, but too much is an overdose. And so again, if we change our thinking around and our language around what word we're using, if you think it's funny that you greened out, if you change that to, I had an overdose of cannabis, that can change your thinking about that a little bit. Intensified effects, highs experienced from cannabis, alcohol, and other substances can be felt sooner and more intensely when used together. And when drinking before using cannabis, higher levels of THC are absorbed, which results in an increased heart rate, increased memory impairment, increased poor judgment, and problems negotiating consensual or safer sex. Like when we're high, we tend not to think, or high and drunk at the same time, we really tend not to think about what other people want. We really just look at what we want. Uh, and then they get into, overuse and where you're getting it from and stuff like that. So there's some contact information on there, the Kids Help Phone, places like that you can call and talk to somebody. You can always get a hold of me on Drug Class website or Facebook, and there's just some more information about there. And so take a look at that. And if it, I really would encourage you, if you smoke weed, to go through that test uh, and answer those questions and think carefully to see if what you are telling yourself about your use of that drug is true. And I've done tests, like hundreds and hundreds of tests like this with lots and lots of kids, and most of the time they really underestimate the impact and effect of what they're doing. And again, like I said when I started, because you like something, it's really difficult to look at the negative side of that. So I'm going to stop sharing this page and get back to just me here for a minute. So take a look at that one more time. Uh, if you do use that drug, doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're 14 or 60, run through that test and check yourself, because checking ourselves is a significantly important thing that lots of us don't do. And if you do the test, I'd really be interested in seeing the results. So you can send it to me at info@drugclass.ca. Thanks for your time. I hope you got something out of this, and I will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to take a look at the depression and anxiety screen that's also on this test. So thanks. Stay safe. Have a good day. Stop recording. This is all way too complicated for me sometimes.